I am sitting in the small house in Minneapolis where snow falls thickly outside the window, turning the entire neighborhood into a classic Christmas painting. It is December 24th, and I, Nathan Keene, 34 years old, have just returned after a long flight from New York. Being a flight attendant means I am often away from home, flying everywhere, serving coffee and smiling at tired passengers. But Christmas is different. I always try to return to my mother, Susan Keene, the 58-year-old woman who retired after many years of teaching music to the kids at the local elementary school. She is my only support since Dad passed away, and I am all she has left. This year I came back earlier than usual. The last flight was delayed due to a snowstorm, and I rushed home to Mom like an excited child. The house is still the same, warm with the scent of fresh pine and baked cookies. She has decorated the small Christmas tree in the corner of the living room, hanging the glittering ornaments that I made with my own hands. I step into the kitchen where she is busy with a pot of turkey soup and pudding. "I'm home, Mom," I call out, and she turns around, a radiant smile on her slightly wrinkled face from age. She hugs me tightly as if afraid I will fly away again. "Merry Christmas, son. Mom made your favorite dish." We chat idly about work, about Holly, my wife who is staying with her parents in New York for a family party. "She sends her Christmas wishes to you," I say, and Mom nods, but her eyes seem to be thinking about something else. Dinner begins. Mom and I sit at the table, an old wooden table that my father once built himself. The candlelight flickers and the hot dishes are neatly arranged. But then I notice something strange. There are 3 sets of cutlery on the table. One for me, one for Mom, and another set placed at the empty spot next to us, as if waiting for someone. My heart tightens slightly. In previous years, since Dad died 20 years ago, the Christmas dinner table has only had 2 sets. Just the 2 of us, mother and son. Why is it different this year? I try to keep my voice normal, taking a sip of red wine. "Mom, why are there 3 sets of cutlery? Did you invite someone?" She pauses, staring straight at the empty space on the table, her eyes clouding over a bit, as if looking into the past. "Yes, Mom prepared for 3 people. That spot is for your father, Daniel Keene." I smile faintly, thinking that perhaps Mom is reminiscing. My father died in a car accident when I was just 14 years old. She rarely mentions him, probably because the pain is too great. I remember him as a tall man, always joking and playing the piano with Mom. "Do you want to remember Dad?" "That's a nice idea. I think Dad would love this turkey." But Mom doesn't smile. She puts down her fork, her voice more serious than ever. "It's not just remembering, Nathan. Today I want to tell you the truth about your father's death. It was not an accident." My heart pounds. The truth about my father's death. Wasn't he killed in a car accident? I still remember the day my father died. It was a stormy night. The police reported that my father's car had an accident and plunged off a cliff. He died on the spot, and we buried him on the hill outside of town. I remember that funeral. The rain poured down and Mom cried until she fainted. Yet today, sitting here, Mom tells me that I need to know the truth about Dad's death. Those words hit me like a punch in the chest. I freeze, my whole body trembling. Dinner ends in heavy silence. I can no longer swallow another bite of turkey, no matter how delicious it is. Mom sits there, her eyes fixed on me with a resolve I have never seen before. She does not cry, does not tremble. Only her voice remains calm, as if recounting an old story. But I am different. My heart pounds wildly, my mind spins with a dozen questions. Mom stands up, clears the plates, her tone calm but somehow urgent. "We're done eating, son. Now I want to take you somewhere." I look up, surprised. "Where, Mom?" It's late, and the snow is falling thickly. Outside the window, white snow blankets the streets. Mom silently puts on her coat and grabs the keys. "To the hill on the edge of town, where your father lies. I need you to see it with your own eyes." Curiosity mixed with fear surges within me. That hill? Where my father is buried. I haven't returned there since the funeral 20 years ago. It is a small cemetery, isolated amid a pine forest where the wind howls and snow covers everything year-round. I put on my coat and follow her to the car, my heart filled with unease. The engine roars to life in the cold night and we drive off on the snow-covered road. Headlights flicker, reflecting the dark silhouettes of trees. I try to ask more, but Mom remains silent, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "You'll understand soon," she whispers. The journey takes longer than I expected, probably because the snow slows us down. The car skids lightly on the icy road and I clutch the armrest tightly. In my mind, memories of Dad flood back like an old film. He was a cheerful man, with a wide smile and skillful hands. He often played piano with Mom and taught me simple calculations when I was little. "You'll become a great accountant like me," he once said. But then that accident. The car plunged off the cliff, the body charred beyond recognition. I remember Mom crying all night and I, a 14-year-old boy, trying to be strong to comfort her. A vague anger begins to creep in, but I push it down, waiting. Finally, we arrive. The hill appears under the dim moonlight, graves peeking out beneath the white snow. Mom turns off the engine, taking a flashlight and... "A shovel?" I startle. "Why did you bring a shovel, Mom?" She doesn't answer immediately, just leads me through the old cemetery gate, our feet sinking deep into the snow. The cold wind cuts into my skin and I shiver despite wrapping my scarf tightly. We stop in front of Dad's grave. The stone marker bears the name Daniel Keene, his birth and death dates, and the words, "Beloved husband and father." A thin layer of snow covers the grave like a white blanket. Mom kneels down, brushing the snow away with her bare hands. Then she looks at me, her eyes glistening under the flashlight beam. "Nathan, take the shovel and dig." Her words strike like thunder. "Dig up the grave? In the middle of the night?" "Mom, what are you saying? This is Dad's grave. We can't..." I step back, my heart pounding. But Mom grabs my hand, her voice resolute. "Trust me. There's something inside you need to see. This is the only way you'll believe the truth." I hesitate, looking around. The cemetery is deserted, only the howling wind and falling snow. If anyone saw us, they'd think we were insane. But Mom's eyes, full of pain and determination, leave me no room to refuse. I take the shovel, my hands shaking, and begin to dig. The frozen ground is hard as rock. Each strike feels like stabbing my own heart. Snow and dirt fly everywhere, and I sweat despite the freezing cold. Mom holds the flashlight, her voice whispering encouragement. "Deeper, son. The coffin isn't buried too deep. With every layer of earth removed, I feel like I'm digging up my own conscience." Anxiety builds. What if Mom is wrong? What if this is just her delusion? But then the sound of metal hitting wood echoes. The coffin. I stop, gasping for breath. Mom nods, and together we pry open the lid with the shovel. The old wood creaks and a damp, rotten smell rushes out. I shine the flashlight inside and my heart nearly stops. Inside are Dad's remains, white bones, tattered clothes, but beside them a thick folder wrapped in waterproof plastic and secured with rubber bands. It lies there like a secret buried for 20 years. Trembling, I reach for it. The plastic is ice cold under my fingers. The flashlight illuminates faint printed words on the first page. Mercer Holdings internal files, confidential. Mom grasps my hand and says, "Hold it tight, Nathan. All the answers are in there. This is the evidence your father left behind." I am speechless, stunned. Mercer Holdings. That's my father-in-law's company. Why is an internal file from Mercer Holdings in my father's coffin? My mind reels with questions, my legs shaking so badly I can barely stand. I refill the grave, my limbs numb from the cold. No one speaks on the way home. The folder rests on my lap, heavy as a ticking time bomb. I glance at it, curiosity mixed with fear. What is this? Why did Mom hide it in the coffin? And Arthur Mercer, the man I call my father-in-law, does he have anything to do with my real father's death? Back home, we sit at the kitchen table under bright lights. Mom brews 2 cups of hot tea, her hands still trembling slightly. "Now I'll tell you everything," she says, her voice lowering as if the walls have ears. I open the folder, flipping through the old pages. Invoices, contracts, meeting minutes, handwritten notes. All stamped with Mercer Holdings. Mom begins her story, her voice slow as if reliving the past. 20 years ago, my father, Daniel Keene, was the chief accountant at Mercer Holdings, an international trading conglomerate founded and run by Arthur Mercer. Arthur is now my father-in-law, the wealthy man with an empire spanning pharmaceuticals to finance. 20 years ago, they were best friends. Your father and Arthur went to college together, Mom recounts. They started the business together from a small office in Minneapolis. Daniel handled the books. Arthur handled the deals. The company grew fast, becoming a giant. I listen, picturing Dad in a suit, hunched over a desk. He loved his work, but always came home on time for family dinner. Then your father discovered it, Mom continues, her voice heavy. Shady transactions. Money laundering through shell companies, tax evasion with fake invoices, smuggling banned pharmaceuticals, bribing officials to cover it up. All orchestrated by your father-in-law, running it like a criminal network. My heart clenches. My father-in-law, the man who appears in magazines in expensive suits with a perfect smile. He frequently hosts charity events. Yet he was behind a criminal network? Your father couldn't stay silent, Mom goes on. He secretly copied the files and sent them to the police. But your father-in-law found out. He had eyes everywhere. Mom's voice trembles with anger. She says my father-in-law bribed authorities, rendering the fraud reports useless. Then he sent men to hunt Dad down. That night, your father was driving home. They rammed his car and staged it as an accident. The police concluded hastily with no further investigation. Your father-in-law controlled everything. I gripped the table's edge, rage boiling inside. Dad died for doing the right thing while my father-in-law lived in luxury, marrying his daughter to me like a cruel joke. Mom continues, her voice choking. Back then I was only 38, raising you alone, unable to fight his power. Your father-in-law sent fake condolences and even pretended to help financially. But I knew the truth from the files your father left, so I hid them in the coffin, the only safe place, waiting for the day they could see the light. I ask why she didn't turn them in sooner. Mom sighs. I intended to hand them over to the authorities. But then you brought Holly home to introduce her. I knew you loved her more than yourself. Holly is Arthur's daughter, the man who killed your father, but she is innocent. I didn't want to destroy your happiness. So I chose silence, hoping everything would be okay. But now it's different. Mom looks at me, her eyes blazing. I see how your wife's family looks down on you, oppresses you. Your father-in-law sees you as an enemy. Your mother-in-law subtly reminds you of your background. I can't take it anymore. The secret must come out. The evidence in your hands can topple the entire Mercer empire. You decide, Nathan. This is your father's legacy. I sit motionless, the folder in front of me. Decide, topple my wife's family or bury the past? The inner conflict begins, and I know this Christmas Eve is only the start of the storm. I drive back to our apartment in Minneapolis through the thick snowfall, my mind spinning as if caught in a vortex. My wife's and my apartment is on the outskirts, a quiet place with tall pine trees and a lake that freezes over in winter. It's not a flashy villa like the Mercer home in New York. It's just a small, cozy house where we've built our own life. But tonight, as I push open the door and step inside, that peaceful atmosphere suddenly feels suffocating. My wife is still at her parents' house, so the apartment is empty. Only the ticking of the clock and the warmth from the fireplace. I collapse onto the sofa, the folder still clutched tightly in my hand as if letting go would make everything crumble. The dim table lamp casts light on the old pages. I don't dare open it right away, I'm afraid the truth will burn everything I once believed in. Instead, I close my eyes and memories flood back like a violent storm. 8 years as a Mercer son-in-law, years I once thought were just class differences, now revealed as a dark fate. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a tragic play where I unknowingly played the lead. I clearly remember our wedding day 8 years ago. It was a lavish ceremony at the Mercer estate in the Hamptons, described by the press as a Cinderella story. The commoner marrying the heiress. My wife appeared in a stunning white gown, her golden hair flowing, her blue eyes sparkling with joy. She was 24 then, like a goddess stepping out of a dream. We met on a flight. I was a flight attendant, she was a first-class passenger. She smiled when I brought her coffee, and from there, love blossomed. "You're the most genuine man I've ever met," she said on our first date. I loved her for that gentleness, for the way she saw the world without the lens of money. The ceremony was perfect, white roses lining the aisle, a live orchestra playing Canon in D, and hundreds of guests applauding as we exchanged rings. Arthur Mercer, her father, chairman of Mercer Holdings, stood there in a sleek black suit, a stiff smile on his lips. He patted my shoulder, but his hand felt heavy, like a warning. "Welcome to the family, Mr. Keene," he said, but his eyes were cold, as if looking at a stranger. Back then, I thought it was just a rich father's protectiveness. Now I understand. Marjorie, my mother-in-law, descended from English aristocracy, hugged my wife tighter, whispering something in her daughter's ear. She wore a striking red silk dress, but her smile never reached her eyes. After our honeymoon in Hawaii, where Holly and I laughed and played on the beach, forgetting the world, we returned to reality. And that's when I realized the name Keene was never truly welcome in the Mercer family. It started with small things, but they piled up like an avalanche. My father-in-law always called me Mr. Keene instead of Nathan, as if reminding me of the gap. He was a tall man with silver hair and a deep, commanding voice. To him, I was an outsider, a lucky intruder into the world of a wealthy, powerful dynasty. Mercer Holdings wasn't just a company. It was an empire, with branches from pharmaceuticals to real estate, and my father-in-law was its ruler. I remember our first family dinner after the wedding, the Mercer Mansion in Manhattan with its grand dining room, walnut table, and priceless paintings on the walls. My wife held my hand under the table, reassuring me. My father-in-law sat at the head, talking about a new deal. We just acquired a pharmaceutical company in Europe. Shares are up 20%. Marjorie nodded and added, "Holly, remember when you were little? Your father taught you about the family legacy." Then she turned to me with a thin smile. "Nathan, what do you do again?" "Flight attendant." Must be exhausting, flying all the time. Holly could have chosen someone more suitable, but my daughter, perhaps she likes simplicity. Her words cut like a knife. I forced a smile, but my pride was pierced. My wife jumped in. "Mom, Nathan works hard. I love him for who he is." But Marjorie just shrugged. "I'm only saying. He should be grateful he married my daughter." My father-in-law said nothing, just stared at me with icy eyes as if appraising defective goods. Then there was Dylan Mercer, my wife's 28-year-old brother, a spoiled playboy with slicked back hair and designer clothes. He never hesitated to mock me. At my wife's birthday party, my brother-in-law slapped my back. "Hey, brother-in-law, what do you do on those flights? Serve soda?" Everyone laughed, and I swallowed my anger, pretending it was fine. My wife pulled me onto the balcony and hugged me. "Don't mind my brother. He's immature." But those words accumulated like drops filling a glass to overflow. At family gatherings, often at the estate or on the yacht, I was always sidelined. They talked about stocks, power, legacy. "Mercer Holdings is expanding into Asia," my father-in-law declared. "Dylan, you'll manage the new branch." I sat silently listening, feeling invisible. Whenever I spoke, say sharing an interesting flight story, Arthur would silence me with a sharp glance, heavy enough to freeze the room. "Mr. Keene, we're discussing business," he'd say coldly. My mother-in-law would add, "Nathan, you should learn instead of telling fanciful stories." My brother-in-law would chuckle. "Brother-in-law, do you think you're a pilot? You're just a flight attendant." For 8 years, I endured it for my wife. She always shielded me, stepping in to defend. "Dad, Nathan is my husband. Respect him." But deep down I knew I didn't belong. I thought it was just because of my humble background. My parents were ordinary people with no empire. But now, after Mom's story, sitting in this quiet apartment, the memories return with new meaning. Their coldness wasn't just about class. It was because they knew I was Daniel Keene's son, the man my father-in-law once called a traitor. A chill runs down my spine. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago when Arthur suddenly mentioned traitors in the old company. "Some think they're heroes, but they're just fools," he said, staring at me. Back then I thought it was general. Now it's clear. He meant my father. They knew. Arthur knew I was Daniel's son from the start, and he let Holly marry me, perhaps to control me or as a quiet punishment. For 8 years I lived among people who saw me as a stain on the Mercer bloodline, like a time bomb, waiting to detonate. Now sitting here with the folder, I realized that toppling the Mercer empire would bring Arthur down. Marjorie and Dylan would lose everything. But Holly? She would suffer, maybe even hate me. I wouldn't just dismantle a criminal corporation, I'd destroy my own little home with my own hands. How do I choose between justice for my father and love for my wife? The torment cuts like a blade, and I know this decision will change everything forever. The days following that Christmas dragged on like a prolonged nightmare. I returned to work, flying from Minneapolis to Chicago, then New York, serving passengers with a forced smile on my lips. But at night in the quiet apartment, sleep evaded me like an enemy. I lay awake in bed, my mind torn between two choices: the truth about my father's death or my love for Holly, the woman who had given me everything. The folder sat locked in the cabinet, but it was like a ticking time bomb, its sound echoing in my head every night. I clearly remember the first night after leaving Mom's house. Holly video called from New York, where she was staying with her parents. The screen lit up with her beautiful face, golden hair cascading down, a warm smile on her lips. "Honey, how was Christmas? I miss you so much. Mom and Dad send their regards." Her voice was gentle, full of love, making my heart ache. I wanted to tell her everything, to shout about her father's dark secret, but the words choked in my throat. "It was fine, babe. Just tired." I forced a smile, hung up, and collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming down. How could I destroy her world? Holly knew nothing of her father's crimes. She believed Arthur was a successful businessman, a strict but loving father. If I turned in the files, she would lose everything, and perhaps lose me too. The following days, the torment grew fiercer. By day on the plane, I tried to focus on work, pouring coffee, checking seatbelts, smiling at children. But every time the plane took off, I gazed down at the white clouds and memories of Dad flooded back. He used to take me fishing by the lake, teaching me about honesty. "Son, the truth always wins, no matter how painful." Now what? That truth would kill my marriage. Sleeplessness plagued me. Every night I woke at 3 a.m., brewed strong black coffee, and pored over the folder under the desk lamp. The faded pages told a story of crime, invoices for money laundering through shell companies in the Caymans. Minutes of bribes to DEA officials to smuggle banned pharmaceutical precursors, Arthur's signature everywhere. They cut into my heart like knives. On one side was Dad, the man who died for standing against the darkness. On the other was Holly, the woman who gave me a home, warm kisses, evenings cuddling while watching movies. I imagined her crying when she learned the truth, her hurt eyes staring at me. Why did you do this to me? The pain tore at me, driving me to my knees on the floor, clutching my hair in despair. Finally, on a late afternoon when the snow was melting and the sky was gray, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Mom's house in St. Paul. The familiar road now felt endless. Drizzle fell lightly, windshield wipers working nonstop, matching my chaotic heartbeat. When I arrived, Mom was sitting at the piano playing Silent Night, the Christmas tune still lingering. She looked up, saw my face, and understood immediately. "You've decided, haven't you?" she asked, her voice calm but her eyes full of worry. I sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. "Mom, I'm turning in the files. Dad deserves justice. I can't live with this secret anymore." The words left my mouth and I felt part of the burden lift. But the other part, the fear of losing Holly, still weighed heavily. Mom nodded silently, her eyes a mix of sadness and pride. She hugged me and whispered, "I knew you'd choose right. But remember, justice never comes without taking something." She didn't cry, but I felt her pain. After that conversation, I acted quickly, as if pausing would make me change my mind. Back home, I organized all the documents. The next morning, I flew to Washington, D.C. and contacted the FBI office through an anonymous tip line. They arranged a secret meeting at a suburban coffee shop. The agent who met me was a middle-aged woman with a serious voice. "Mr. Keene, we'll review this, but if it's true, this is big." I handed over the folder, my heart pounding, feeling like I was jumping out of a plane without a parachute. They promised confidentiality, but I knew the risks. Arthur had eyes everywhere. Back home, I waited anxiously. Every doorbell made me jump. The investigation unfolded quietly but spread rapidly. At first, there were no signs. I kept flying, trying to act normal with Holly. She came home after Christmas and hugged me tightly. "You've been weird, Nathan. Is something wrong?" I kissed her and whispered, "Just work, love." But inside I was dying. Then a few weeks later, the first sign appeared. I heard rumors from colleagues. "Mercer Holdings is under unusual audits." My heart raced. They were tracing the hidden transactions. The FBI and DEA coordinated, uncovering shell companies and financial funds, showing money laundering through pharmaceuticals, bribing officials to cover smuggled shipments. Despite the files being confidential, news leaked, as it always does in big cases. An investigative reporter in Washington, likely tipped off by an FBI insider, started digging. The next morning, major papers ran headlines. "Mercer Biotech under federal investigation for fraud and drug smuggling." I read it on my phone at the airport, hands shaking. Blazing red headlines in the New York Times and Washington Post detailed suspicions of laundering millions, smuggling drug precursors under the guise of medical research. Mercer stock plummeted from $150 to $80 in the first hour. The market panicked. Investors dumped shares. The collapse unfolded like dominoes. Corporate bank accounts were frozen, supply chains halted abruptly, pharmaceutical plants in Mexico shut down, shipments stuck at ports. The Manhattan headquarters was raided. FBI agents stormed in at dawn with search warrants, boxes of documents piling up. Hundreds of employees were summoned, some arrested for complicity. I followed the news, heart pounding. Dylan, Holly's brother, was called in for questioning, the playboy now pale-faced in paparazzi photos. Marjorie sobbed on the phone to Holly, which I overheard. "How did this happen? Your father is innocent." Then the climax. Arthur Mercer was detained for questioning. Images of him in his black suit, hands cuffed, escorted out of Mercer Holdings headquarters, flooded national television. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all covered it. He tried to stay composed, but his eyes were wild, silver hair disheveled. "This is a conspiracy," he shouted at reporters, but no one believed him. I stood frozen in the apartment, watching the evening news, the remote slipping from my hand. Holly wasn't home. She was in New York supporting her family, but I knew she was watching at the same time. Mom's words echoed in my head. "Justice never comes without taking something." I understood. My decision was right. My father was finally vindicated, the crimes exposed. But I also knew that from this moment, my life and Holly's love for me would never be the same. My phone buzzed. A text from Holly. "Do you know anything about this?" My heart sank. The storm had arrived, and I was the one who started it. That night, after watching the news about Arthur's arrest, I fell asleep from exhaustion. Then the sound of the door opening jolted me awake. Holly stood at the entrance, motionless, her eyes brimming with tears. her lips trembling as if trying to say something to me but unable to form the words. I sat in the chair, my feet as if nailed to the floor. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the pattering of snow against the window. Then she ran to me and hugged me, bursting into sobs. "Nathan, my dad's been arrested. His company is on the verge of bankruptcy. I'm so scared." I knew I had to tell her the truth, no matter how painful. I took a deep breath, gathering the last scraps of courage I had left, and revealed the secret I'd kept hidden for so long. "Holly, the one who reported your father, it was me." Those words dropped like a bomb, shattering the silence in the room. They echoed in my ears, heavy and irreversible, like a sentence I had passed on myself. Holly couldn't believe what she had just heard. She wiped the tears from her cheeks, her face contorted in shock. "What? What did you say, Nathan? How could that be? You reported my dad. How could you do that?" Her voice trembled, rising in pitch from the pain, and she took a step back, as if I were a stranger instead of her husband. She fired questions in rapid succession, her tone full of desperation. "Why did you hide it from me? Why didn't you tell me before doing something this huge? I'm your wife. I thought we shared everything." She felt deeply betrayed, as if I were the one who had destroyed her family, tearing apart the world she had believed in. Tears fell onto the wooden floor, and her body shook with surging emotions. I could only stand there silently, my voice choking in my throat as I tried to explain. "Holly, I didn't want you to suffer. I know how much you love your dad, and I didn't want you caught in the middle. I just wanted justice for my father, the man your dad killed 20 years ago." Those words of justification came out haltingly, but they only made Holly more despairing. I saw the pain in her eyes like a bleeding wound. Holly shook her head repeatedly, tears still streaming unchecked. She spoke with a voice full of resentment. "You chose the past over the present, Nathan. You chose someone who's gone over the person who's been by your side every day. To me, what you did isn't justice. It's an unforgivable betrayal. You know my dad means everything to me, to our family. How could you do this without thinking about me?" Her words cut into my heart like sharp knives, and I felt the anger mixed with pain in every syllable. She was no longer the gentle Holly I knew. She was a wounded woman trying to protect what little remained of her world. I looked at the wife I loved most in the world, trembling in tears, her body shrinking like a lost child. I wanted to step closer, to hold her and apologize, to wipe the tears from her cheeks. But every step I tried to take felt pulled back by the immense weight of guilt. My hands reached out shakily but then dropped, because I knew that right now, my touch would only make things worse. Remorse surged in my chest, making it hard to breathe, and I could only whisper, "Holly, I love you. I don't want to lose you." Holly didn't respond. With a slow but resolute motion, she removed her wedding ring from her finger, the ring we had exchanged 8 years ago in overflowing happiness. She placed it on the wooden table in the living room. The metallic clink against the wood sounded stark, like a hammer nailing the coffin of our love. She walked past me without another word, her eyes averted as if I no longer existed. The front door closed behind her with a soft click, and soon after, the sound of the car engine started in the driveway, blending with the howling wind. She was gone, leaving the house empty and me, a man standing in the darkness, loneliness so profound it choked me. Outside, the snow fell thicker, the white flakes covering the world like a shroud of mourning. I slumped to the floor, holding the ring she had left behind, the metal ice cold in my palm. I turned it over and over, remembering our wedding day, the vows to be together forever. Now it was all just shattered memories. I understood that to reclaim justice for my father, I had lost everything. Lost Holly, lost our home, lost myself in this chaos. The days that followed passed like a hazy dream, where everything felt illusory and painful. I still went to work, flying from city to city, serving passengers with a mechanical smile, but inside I was a walking corpse. Holly didn't call, didn't text. She had vanished from my life like a ghost. The house was now just a cold place, with memories lingering in every corner. The coffee mug she used to drink from, the half-read book on the nightstand, the faint scent of her perfume on the pillow. Every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my decision had been worth it. Justice for my father, but the price was my love, my home. Mom called every day, her voice gently consoling. "Son, time will heal. You did the right thing." But her words were like a passing breeze, unable to erase the emptiness in my chest. I tried to avoid thinking about Arthur Mercer, the father-in-law who had caused all this. But he haunted me, a looming shadow in my mind. The news constantly covered the case. Mercer Holdings stock continued to plummet. High-ranking employees were arrested, and he remained in federal detention near Washington, D.C., awaiting further investigation. I read those articles, saw pictures of him being escorted away, and anger gradually replaced the pain. Why was he still alive, still breathing while my father lay under cold earth? Why was he allowed to destroy my family without consequence? Finally, after a week of enduring it, I decided I had to go to the detention facility and confront the man who had ruined my family face to face. Not to forgive, but to look him in the eye and ask why. To let him know I was no longer the weak son-in-law. I flew to D.C. on a drizzly morning, rented a car, and drove through winding roads to the Federal Detention Center, a gray building surrounded by barbed wire fences and watchtowers. The security checks were strict. Paperwork, body searches, suspicious glances from the guards. I waited in a cold holding room, gripping my phone tightly, heart pounding with anticipation. Would he agree to see me? Would I have the courage to say everything? Finally, after 2 hours, they led me to the visiting room, a narrow space divided by thick glass with 2 chairs facing each other and an old telephone for communication. The room was so cold I shivered, though not from the temperature. Arthur sat across from me behind the glass, still exuding his old air of authority despite wearing an orange jumpsuit. His eyes were still sharp like a hawk watching prey. He picked up the phone and gave a thin smile. "Mr. Keene, come to visit your former father-in-law? Or to gloat?" His voice crackled through the speaker, but it still carried authority, as if he were sitting in a luxury office instead of a prison. I looked at him, waves of anger and pain surging inside me. Blood rushed to my head, my heart pounding as if it would burst. There was no turning back. I had to say it all. Confront the monster who killed my father and was now destroying my life. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling but resolute. "Mr. Mercer, I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to ask why. Why did you kill my father? Daniel Keene, your best friend, the man who helped you build Mercer Holdings from nothing. Why did you stage an accident to silence him?" Arthur was silent for a moment, his eyes flashing with anger. Then he slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the glass and startling me. His voice was like steel. "You dare ask me that? Daniel was a traitor. He dug into things that weren't his business, copied files to report me. His death was the price he paid for betrayal. And you, son of a traitor, should be grateful I took you in all these years. I let my daughter marry you, allowed you into our world, even though you're just an ordinary flight attendant." His words cut into my heart like a knife. I suppressed the boiling rage, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the phone. "Took me in? You call humiliating me for 8 years taking me in? You always looked at me like an enemy, never respected me. Why did you let Holly marry me? To control me? To punish me quietly? My father died for daring to tell the truth about your crimes, money laundering, smuggling, bribery. And now, justice has exposed everything you tried to hide. I demand you admit it. Admit it and let the law judge you." Arthur listened, his face twitching slightly as if my words had struck an old wound. But then he let out a contemptuous laugh, the sound echoing through the phone like a crow's caw. "Justice? You're too naive, Nathan. Justice only exists on paper in the law books lawyers read. This world runs on power, money, connections, and people who know how to control. I built an empire from nothing, and you think a few old papers can topple me? You'll regret daring to oppose me." I didn't respond, just stared at him with cold, unwavering eyes. The anger inside me no longer exploded. It had turned into a steady, enduring flame. I stood up, set the phone down, but before turning away, Arthur leaned close to the glass, a sinister smile on his face, his voice whispering through the speaker. "You'll pay for this, Nathan. Dare to oppose me, and you'll lose more than you think." I left the visiting room, walking through the long, echoing prison hallway, my footsteps resounding on the cold concrete floor. My heart pounded, blood rushing in my ears, but each step was a silent vow. Even if I had to face hell itself, I wouldn't stop. Arthur could threaten, but he had already lost. Justice was coming, and I would witness his complete downfall. The days following that confrontation passed in a suspended state, like a ship adrift in a stormy sea. My flight attendant job continued. Long flights, fake smiles for passengers, lonely hours in the sky, but my mind constantly circled back to Arthur and his threat. I tried not to think about Holly, about the wedding ring still in my coat pocket, but the pain was like an unhealing wound. Mom was my last anchor, the strong woman who had sacrificed everything to protect me. We talked on the phone every day. She told me about the new pieces she was playing on the piano, about the small garden behind the house, and I told her about my flights, trying to sound cheerful so she wouldn't worry. "Be careful, Nathan," she always said, her voice warm but full of concern. I knew she was afraid that the Mercer influence lingered, even with Arthur behind bars. One gloomy winter morning, with a gray sky like a funeral shroud and light snow falling outside the window, I called Mom as usual. I was at Minneapolis Airport waiting for my next flight, and I dialed her number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, no answer. I frowned, thinking maybe she was busy making coffee or playing the piano. I called again. The rings continued steadily, but silence on the other end. A bad premonition crept in like cold water running down my spine. Mom always picked up quickly. She knew I worried. "Mom, why aren't you answering?" I whispered to myself, my heart beating faster. I canceled the flight, ran to the airport garage, jumped in the car, and drove straight to St. Paul. Not far, but the road felt endless today. On the way, I tried calling a few more times, but still nothing. The bad feeling grew stronger, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I remembered our last call, just 2 days earlier. "Son, I'm proud of you. But be careful with Arthur. Your father-in-law isn't the type to give up easily." Her voice had trembled slightly, but I thought it was just normal worry. Now what? Was Arthur's threat real? The car sped along the highway, snow spraying from the tires, and I prayed silently, "Mom, please be okay." When I arrived, the small house in St. Paul appeared under a thin layer of snow, but it was eerily silent. No smoke rose from the chimney, no warm light glowed from the kitchen window as usual. The front door was ajar, cold wind blowing in, and that made my heart clench. Mom always locked the door carefully. She was afraid of burglars. I parked hastily, ran up the steps, and pushed the door open. Inside was chaos. Furniture pushed aside, the sofa tipped over, books scattered on the floor, and a strange smell, metallic mixed with damp earth, assaulted my nose. "Mom. Mom." I called desperately, my voice echoing in the empty house. I ran everywhere, from the kitchen to the living room, then the bedroom, heart pounding like a war drum, cold sweat breaking out despite the freezing weather. I suddenly froze at the end of the hallway leading to her study. There on the cold wooden floor, Susan Keene, my mother, lay motionless, her body curled in an unnatural position, eyes half closed, face pale. In that moment, my world completely collapsed like a skyscraper hit by a bomb. My legs gave way. I rushed over and knelt beside her, hugging her cold, rigid body tightly. "Mom. Mom, no. Please don't." Sobs choked out from my throat, echoing in the empty house, mingling with the howling wind outside. Tears streamed hot on her face, and I held her tighter, as if I could bring warmth back to her. I noticed the bruises on her neck, faint hand marks, as if someone had strangled her. and long skid marks on the wooden floor, like dragged footprints. My mother had been murdered, and the cruelest part was that it was because I had dared to challenge the Mercer Empire. Arthur, my father-in-law, had made good on his threat through henchmen or hired killers to silence her, to get revenge on me. The pain in my chest turned into utter rage, like hellfire erupting. I screamed in despair, the shout tearing through the nightmare surrounding me. Why? Why did he do this? "Mom, I'm sorry," the scream echoed, making the windows rattle slightly, and I pounded the floor, blood seeping from my knuckles, but I felt no pain, only hatred and boundless loss. I called the police, voice trembling. "My mother, she's been killed. Please come right away." Sirens pierced the quiet night. Ambulances and police flooded the neighborhood, yellow tape cordoning off the house, flashing lights blinding. The coroner, a calm middle-aged man, examined and said softly, "She was strangled. Professional job. No clear traces." The police chief patted my shoulder. "We'll investigate, Mr. Keene." I sat numbly in the yard, watching them take photos and collect evidence, my mind blank. When the police left after a few hours of initial investigation, my mother's body taken for autopsy, the house sank into cold silence, like a tomb. I stood in the living room looking at familiar mementos, the old piano where she taught me to play, the family photo on the wall with Mom, Dad, and young me, her beloved music books. Each small item seemed to hold her warmth, choking my chest, tears flowing again. I touched the piano keys, hearing the faint echo, and remembered evenings when she played Clair de Lune, whispering, "Music heals all wounds, son." Then I noticed under the cushion on the sofa, where she often rested, a corner of a white envelope peeking out amid the mess. I flipped the cushion and recognized Mom's familiar soft handwriting. On the envelope, simply, "For you, Nathan." My heart clenched as if squeezed. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were a few trembling lines in weak penmanship. "Nathan, if you're reading this, the darkness came first. Don't blame yourself. Mom's death isn't your fault. It's the crime of those who fear the light of truth." At the bottom, "Keep going, son. Justice needs someone brave enough to stand, even alone." I realized she had foreseen her fate, perhaps after I told her about meeting Arthur, sensing the danger. The letter was her final will, a command I couldn't turn from, a torch lighting my path in the darkness. I collapsed, clutching the letter to my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom had sacrificed everything, and now she passed the mission to me. A few days later, I held Mom's funeral at the small church in the old neighborhood where she once taught the choir. Cold drizzle fell, and only old neighbors and a few of her friends attended quietly. No crowds, no lavish flowers. I stood by the coffin, eyes raw from crying, all tears dry. I placed her letter on her chest, seeing it as a final goodbye, part of her soul going with her. The priest read the service, voice deep and warm. Susan was a kind woman. She lived for love and justice. As the coffin was lowered into the cold earth beside Dad's grave, I stood there a long time, fists clenched, head bowed. Rain soaked my shoulders, drenching my clothes, but I felt no cold, only enveloping loneliness. No one left beside me. Dad gone, Mom gone, wife left, only me and my promise to her. Before leaving, I knelt by the headstone and whispered, "I'll do what you wanted. I'll make him pay." The wind howled through the trees like her reply, and I stood up, walking away with renewed resolve, though my heart was full of pain. The months following the funeral dragged on like a prolonged nightmare, where time no longer held any meaning. I returned to work, drifting through the skies like a ghost, serving passengers without truly being present. Each flight was an escape from reality, the roaring engines drowning out the pain, the white clouds obscuring memories of Mom lying motionless on the floor. After months of exhaustive investigation, the evidence I had submitted, the old folder from Dad's coffin, was finally verified as authentic. The FBI and DEA worked closely, expanding the case quietly but relentlessly, like a net tightening around the Mercer Empire. They traced the clues in the files, shady transactions, forged invoices, and massive sums flowing through offshore accounts. Mercer Biotech, the pharmaceutical subsidiary Arthur had always boasted was the flagship of medical research, turned out to be a sophisticated front for money laundering and illegally smuggling controlled pharmaceutical precursors abroad. Shipments labeled lab equipment were actually packed with chemicals used to produce synthetic drugs, smuggled to Mexico and Europe in disguised containers. An FBI agent called to inform me, "Mr. Keene, your evidence was the key. We've gathered additional testimony from internal witnesses. Several former Mercer employees have agreed to cooperate for reduced sentences." His voice over the phone was professional, but I felt only emptiness. Justice was advancing, but Mom was no longer here to see it. A wave of high-ranking Mercer Holdings executives was arrested in simultaneous raids. I followed the news despite myself. Images of suited men being escorted from offices, hands cuffed, faces pale under reporters' flashes. Forged contracts, hundreds of pages concealing bribe payments to DEA officials, were seized from secret safes. Medical research shipments were intercepted at ports, open to reveal barrels of banned chemicals worth millions. Mercer Holdings subsidiaries were shut down one by one, from pharmaceutical plants in South America to investment funds in the Cayman Islands. The stock market reeled. Mercer shares kept plummeting. Investors panicked and dumped, and the empire my father-in-law had built over 4 decades began crumbling like a sandcastle. I remembered Mercer family gatherings where he bragged about his immortal legacy, now reduced to ashes. The investigation expanded to uncover evidence of multiple contract killings, making my heart clench. My father, Daniel Keene's death 20 years ago was just one of them. Testimony from a former Mercer security employee who had worked for Arthur confirmed he was ordered to handle Dad after discovering the copied documents. The federal trial lasted 6 weeks in a Washington, D.C. courthouse, the atmosphere so tense it could be cut with a knife. I flew in weekly, sitting in the public gallery watching Arthur, my father-in-law, now gaunt in a prison jumpsuit, led into the courtroom. The prosecutor, a sharp woman with a voice like steel, charged him with 5 major counts. Federal money laundering through international transactions, smuggling controlled precursors in violation of DEA laws, financial fraud defrauding investors, obstructing justice by bribing officials, and premeditated murder, including both my parents. Each charge was backed by mountains of evidence, the files I submitted, witness testimonies, recordings, bank trails, and even security footage from Mom's house showing the killer's shadow slipping in the night before. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. My father-in-law's expensive legal team tried to defend him, claiming slander, forged documents, coincidental deaths, but everything collapsed under the weight of truth. A key witness, Arthur's former assistant, took the stand, voice trembling as he recounted secret meetings and the order to handle Keene. Arthur tried to stay composed, but I saw his hand shake while taking notes. His final statement, a long-winded speech about business legacy and conspiracy against him, only deepened the courtroom silence. Finally, the court sentenced Arthur, life imprisonment without parole, plus seizure of all personal assets and dissolution of Mercer Holdings. The gavel struck and Arthur bowed his head, the first time I saw him so broken. The press called it the biggest pharmaceutical and money laundering scandal in 2 decades. Major outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, covered it extensively. Photos of my father-in-law being led away, analyses of the fallen empire, and the story of the brave whistleblower, me, though I avoided all interviews. The Mercer family disintegrated. Marjorie, my mother-in-law, sold the mansion to pay debts. Dylan, my brother-in-law, was arrested for involvement, and the family name was erased, becoming a symbol of greed and crime. Arthur Mercer, once a powerful king, was now just an aging prisoner, emblem of corruption. As I left the courthouse after the final sentencing, I stood silently in the thick snowfall outside in D.C. Justice had prevailed. My parents were vindicated, the crimes exposed to light. But inside I felt only emptiness, a vast void nothing could fill. I thought of Dad, of Mom, of what they lost, and the price of truth was too high. Family gone, love lost, myself shattered. Snow fell on my shoulders, bitterly cold, and I walked alone carrying Mom's promise. Keep going, even if alone. The days after the trial felt like the world had stopped for me. The media buzzed with headlines about the fall of an empire, but I avoided it all. I flew back to Minneapolis, returning to familiar flights where the vast sky helped me forget, if only a little. But at night the emptiness remained, an unfillable void. I thought of Arthur Mercer, now wasting away with a life sentence, and the anger still smoldered. He had been convicted, but I hadn't truly closed the chapter. I needed to see him one last time, not for explanations as there were none left, but to confront him, to look into the eyes of the man who killed both my parents, and to let him know I was still standing. 2 months after the trial, I applied for a prison visit. The process was more cumbersome than before: paperwork, security checks, approval waits. But eventually I was granted permission. As the prison loomed under a leaden sky, barbed wire glinting in the cold wind, my heart clenched. Inside, the stench of disinfectant and metal was overpowering. I followed the guard through long, echoing corridors until I reached the familiar room. Thick glass separating 2 chairs, an old telephone waiting. Arthur sat across from me behind the glass, looking much older than our last meeting. His silver hair was disheveled, his face gaunt from months in prison, the orange jumpsuit making him seem smaller. But his eyes still held that cold arrogance, like a caged beast with claws intact. He picked up the phone and gave a thin smile. "You again, Nathan? Here to savor your victory?" His voice crackled through the speaker, dripping with sarcasm, making my blood boil. I stared at him, heart pounding, and sat down, gripping the phone with a slight tremble. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice choking with rising anger. "Mr. Mercer, I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to ask why you killed my mother, a kind woman who never harmed anyone. She only wanted justice for my father, and you ordered her murder. Why didn't you stop, even after being exposed, even after losing?" My words fired like bullets, and I saw his face harden. I remembered Mom on the floor, bruises on her neck, and the pain raised my voice. "She never touched you, never directly threatened you. How could you be so cruel?" He sat silent for a moment, his eyes flashing, perhaps hatred, perhaps glee. Then he smirked, his voice cold and ruthless, as if stating the obvious. "You want to know why? Because I wanted you to taste loss, Nathan. You took my empire, my freedom, so I took what was most precious to you. She was just a pawn, a reminder never to cross me." His words slapped me like a physical blow, blood rushing to my head. He spoke of my mother as an object, a tool for revenge, and that cruelty made me shake. I trembled with rage, knuckles white on the phone. "Do you ever regret it? Killing a mother just for revenge? She raised me alone, sacrificed everything, and you took her life for your ego?" My voice broke, and he lifted his head, eyes gleaming with familiar arrogance. He sneered. "Regret? That's for the weak, Nathan. Power is the only truth in this world. Morality, justice. They're illusions for people like you and your father. I built everything from nothing, and I won't regret protecting it." His words cut into my heart like knives, shredding any hope he had a shred of humanity. I clenched my fists, slamming the glass table. The bang startled the guards outside, who rushed to check. Tears and anger mixed, choking me, making it hard to breathe. He sat there, unfazed, smiling defiantly, as if still a powerful king rather than a prisoner. He leaned close to the glass, whispering, "If not for my daughter loving you, you'd have joined your mother in the grave long ago. I spared you for her, but now, you think you won? Your life is shattered, and that's my final gift." His words were poison, seeping into my cells, but instead of breaking me, they fueled my hatred. I stared at him long, my eyes no longer trembling, only filled with contempt, a clean flame burning away impurities. I understood the man before me had lost all humanity, just a shadow of power and sin, a rotten soul beyond saving. I stood, set the phone down without another word, and turned away. My footsteps echoed on the cold tile of the prison hallway, each one severing the last tie between us. He could laugh, threaten from behind bars, but I was free. Free from fear, from the burden of the past. This confrontation was the end, and I stepped outside, breathing the frigid air, knowing my journey wasn't over. A year passed since Arthur Mercer's sentencing, and my life gradually found a rhythm, though not like before. I still worked as a flight attendant, flying everywhere, smiling at passengers despite the scars inside. The house in Minneapolis was now just mine, but I had cleaned it, letting sunlight through the windows and soft music from the old radio. I played piano in the evenings, the pieces Mom taught me, and sometimes paused, looking out the window, remembering Mom's gentle smile, Dad's warm storytelling voice, and the painful years that couldn't be erased. Justice had come, but it brought no joy, only fragile peace like snow melting after a long winter. One March afternoon, as snow began to melt, turning streets into shimmering puddles under spring sun, I heard a soft knock. I was at the kitchen table making coffee, and the sound made my heart race. No one had visited since Mom's funeral. I opened the door, and Holly stood there, thinner than I remembered, golden hair loose, face weary, but eyes clearer and more peaceful than before. She wore a simple coat, no longer the Mercer glamour. "Nathan," her voice trembled like a whisper from the past. I stood frozen, staring, my heart a storm of anger, longing, and surprise. She stepped in when I invited her, sat on the sofa, clutching her bag. "For 2 years I left everything," she said, voice soft but firm. "I sold the house, cut ties with Mom and my brother, traveled alone to think, to face the truth about my father. I read the files, heard the testimonies. Dad was wrong, Nathan. He was a criminal and I was blind. You did nothing wrong. I'm sorry for abandoning you when you were hurting most after losing your mom. I was scared, angry, but now I understand. You chose justice and I'm proud of you." In her eyes, no Mercer pride, only quiet, sincere love, like the girl I first met on the plane. I was silent a long time, sitting across from her, mind reeling. The anger in me had cooled over time, leaving only weariness and compassion. I remembered her crying for her dad, leaving the ring, but also happy moments. Walks by the lake, embraces in the snow. "Holly, I don't know what to say," I whispered. "I thought we were lost forever." She took my hand, tears rolling. "I thought so too. But I can't live without you. Give me a chance to make it right." Finally, I opened my arms, welcoming her back, not with youthful impulse, but genuine forgiveness from a heart that had been through hell. In the time that followed, we started over, slowly and sincerely. We remarried in a simple ceremony by the lake near home. No guests, no extravagance, just spring breeze and sunset dyeing the water red. The priest was a local elder, and we exchanged new rings, plain, no diamonds, with vows. "In pain or joy, we'll be together." Holly leaned on my shoulder, whispering, "Thank you for forgiving." And I knew this was a new beginning, where the past was a lesson, not a chain. A year later, Holly gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, in a small Minneapolis hospital. Their cries sounded like the start of a new life, where the past was just a faint memory. We named the boy Daniel after my father and the girl Susan after Mom. The children brought light to the house, baby laughter, sleepless nights cradling them, simple joys I never imagined. Every evening I played piano to lull them to sleep, the melodies Mom taught softly echoing. Holly rested her head on my shoulder, saying quietly, "Finally we can live for those who fell. Your parents, and even my dad, despite his mistakes." Outside, the wind blew through the trees, carrying rare peace, the end of a tear-soaked journey and the start of a new life full of kindness and light. I looked at my family and knew justice wasn't just punishment, but a chance to live on, to love no matter the cost. One beautiful autumn afternoon, when golden leaves scattered the streets and the crisp air carried the scent of damp earth, I decided to take the family to visit my parents' graves. We drove through familiar suburban roads in Minneapolis, my wife beside me, holding my hand tightly, a silent reminder of what we had overcome. The two children, Daniel and Susan, now 2 years old, sat in the back chattering about Grandpa and Grandma they only knew from my stories. "Daddy, where are Grandpa and Grandma?" Daniel asked, his big eyes innocent. I smiled through the rearview mirror. "They're in a peaceful place, son. Today we're going to visit them." Holly turned back to stroke our daughter's hair. "They were wonderful people and they're always watching over us." The trip wasn't sad. It was part of healing, a way for me to teach the kids about courage and love. When we arrived at the small cemetery in St. Paul, the afternoon sun was dipping west, painting the fiery maple trees red. The cemetery lay isolated on the hill, with simple graves and a cool breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. We walked the gravel path carrying fresh bouquets, white daisies for Dad's grave, symbolizing the purity and loyalty he always taught me, and white lilies for Mom's, her favorite for their gentle fragrance and fragile beauty. I sat by the graves, my hand gently brushing the cold stone, feeling like I was touching memories. Emotions welled up inside, aching longing for evenings when Mom played piano to lull me to sleep, for times Dad taught me to fish by the lake. Deep gratitude for teaching me honesty and bravery, values that carried me through hell, and a peace I'd never known, as if the storm had passed, leaving a clear sky. Sitting there under the falling maple leaves, I reflected on the long, arduous journey. I understood that justice isn't just punishing evil like Arthur's life sentence, but the courage to face truth, even if it costs everything. Dad lost his life for daring to expose it. Mom sacrificed to protect the files, and I temporarily lost Holly, lost our home, pursuing that justice. But that courage brought freedom, freedom from secrets, from fear. By the graves, I whispered to my parents, "I understand now. Justice isn't an end, it's a beginning. It demands strength, accepting loss to find light." Holly sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, and I knew she was reflecting on her own path. Leaving her family, facing her father's crimes, returning to me with true love. I realized forgiveness isn't forgetting, not erasing Arthur's pain, but freeing oneself from hatred. I once hated him enough to want personal vengeance, but now, with him wasting away in prison, I chose forgiveness. Not for him, but for myself, to avoid being imprisoned by anger. My parents would want that for me today. Dad, who taught honesty without hatred. Mom, with her letter urging keep going even alone, a reminder of compassion. "Thank you, Mom and Dad," I whispered, tears rolling down my cheeks. "I've learned that lesson. Forgive to live on." Watching Holly and the kids playing near the trees. Daniel chasing a falling leaf, Susan giggling as Mom chased her. I smiled, a genuine smile from the heart. They were living proof of the final lesson. Happiness isn't in fame or power, as my father-in-law chased until destroying everything, but in the people we choose to love and protect. "Love, look at them," I said to Holly. She turned, beaming. "They're the greatest gift, Nathan. And you're my rock." We embraced by the graves, peace spreading. Simple happiness in hugs, children's laughter, not money or power. I whispered as if to my parents, "I did it. Everything's at peace now." A gentle breeze carried golden leaves onto the graves like a distant reply. I imagined Dad smiling, Mom stroking my cheek, and the longing no longer hurt, only warmth. We stood. I took Holly's hand, led the kids along the sunlit path. Our shadows stretched over the golden leaves, blending into the warm sunset like a perfect family portrait. Daniel and Susan ran ahead laughing, and Holly leaned on my shoulder. "We made it, love." Behind was a closed past, dark secrets, painful losses, lonely battles. Ahead was the future, where justice, love, and forgiveness coexist, reminding us that even in deepest loss, light can be found. I looked at the clear autumn sky and knew my journey wasn't in vain. It taught me to live, love, and forgive. With my family beside me, I was ready for what came next, with an open, peaceful heart.